our 2025 Social Work Policy and Politics with our focus topic on futuring for transformative approaches to policy making in Richmond, Virginia. My name is Danita Trice, and I am the Alumni Engagement Officer for the School of Social Work, among other schools as well. I'm really excited to have each of you in the building today. First, I would love to let you know that this is brought to you by the C. Bernard Scotch Fund. That is our funder of this particular event. So we are very thankful to that fund for sure. Social Work Policy and Politics is an annual event that we've done a number of years now. And this is a way that we've been able to engage the social work community and the community at large to promote the importance of macro social work. At this time, I would like to call our very own Dean, Gary Cuddyback, to greet you and give you a welcome at this time.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much, Gary Cuddyback, Dean of the school, as of November last year. So prior to that, I was interim dean for a while, and just delighted to be here. And these are such wonderful events. And Danita and James and Anna, let's give an applause to such a wonderful audience. So, it's a pleasure to see you here. Also virtually, we have some folks virtually. So thank you for coming. I'm particularly excited for this topic, and I don't have to. Hey, Jackie, how are you? Thank you for joining. I hate to ask where you're stuck in traffic. I know that's always fun. So thank you so much. In these challenging times, we need macro social workers and practice and policy now more than ever. So the topic tonight couldn't be more important or timely. So this is really a wonderful opportunity to get together. There's plenty happening in the macro space at the School of Social Work, which is one of my strategic priorities. I would love to see our macro program double, triple, quadruple, what's next, quintuple in size and focus. And I think we had an event that attracted, what was the other event, James, that attracted maybe 50 or 60 students?
The mentoring event?
No, it was a macro. It was something that Alex and Alex and Kimberly did. So far with Dr. Alex Wagaman and Kimberly sort of leading on macro initiatives, we've had 2 symposium already where students had the opportunity to hear from macro scholars. We had Dr. Anna Ortega-Williams and Dr. Jama Shelton from Hunter College, and they talked about fellow change makers and inspiring to create meaningful impact for the future. We also had macro practitioners from a variety of disciplines offer students 5-minute elevator pitches about their work and key skills in compelling careers in macro. And then we've got a macro coffee chat at the beginning of the semester, and we'll be providing more opportunities to learn about macro social work, joining the specialization, and then also pursuing fulfilling careers in the space. And then there's a few CEU and training opportunities that we can highlight. We have an ongoing clinical lecture series in severe and persistent mental illness. This spring is the second time we're running that, so this is a focus on different topics. The last one we had was women of reproductive age or pregnant women and SMI. There's one tonight, and it is on malingering as a diagnosis and severe mental illness. We've done criminal justice and mental health. We've had medications. So this will be an ongoing series that we do each spring that offers CEUs and is well attended. We've also got clinical supervision training that we're doing as a school now. This is for LCSWs or LPCs, so we're collaborating with the College of Health Professions. So we offered this last month and had over 60 participants. So we're offering it a little less expensive than the state's doing it. So it's a nice thing we're doing for alumni in the area. both on the LPC side and LCSW side. So that's really terrific and exciting thing we offer. So stay tuned for more opportunities to engage. We have coffee and conversations later in the spring, as well as our end of the year alumni happy hour. And this will be open to recently graduated and alums too. So Danny will be sharing this. And if you're interested in becoming more involved, please see someone from the team, James, Anna, Danita. As Danita mentioned, the Scotch Fund directly supports this event and others like it. So your support helps us continue to grow our macro initiative and so forth. So again, thank you for joining us. It is now my pleasure to turn things over to our wonderful host, Amy Strite, who's a graduate from 1990 M.S.W.
Thank you, and special thank you to School of Social Work. We are delighted to have you all here today here at the SPAN Center. So the SPAN Center is the area agency on aging. So we serve older adults, caregivers, and persons living with disabilities. And our whole focus, we are deeply rooted in service, advocacy, and a commitment to ensure that individuals in our community live with dignity and opportunity. So really welcome and thank you for being here. As Adine mentioned, I'm a 1990 graduate, and I cannot think of a better topic during this time. So really thankful you all are here. For those of you who are actually in the building, we have intentionally made an effort to create artwork, which is a form of advocacy and supports social determinants of health. And there are some special exhibits throughout the organization. So please make yourselves feel at home and travel about when we're done. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy and Dean Cuddyback. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our incredible panel for this evening. At this time, the slide will be advanced for our online space. We have an incredible moderator this evening, Marc Cheatham.
Incredible.
Marc.
Yes.
Yes,
Sure.
you are
Not
incredible.
sure about all that. High praise.
Marc is a 2005 Bachelor of Social Work graduate from BCU's School of Social Work. Marc began his professional career working for then Lieutenant Governor Kaine, now U.S. Senator Tim Kaine, in 2004. Marc has worked as a constituent services director and senior policy advisor with a focus on affordable housing and the subprime mortgage crisis. Marc has worked on 2 successful political campaigns, the Office of the Governor, the Democratic National Committee, and U.S. Senate. In addition, Marc has created multiple community media platforms, the latest being the Black Baseball Mixtape, which focuses on elevating Black baseball growth and participation at every level. Joining Marc, he will serve as our moderator. Joining Marc is also Abbey Philips, Jackie Lawrence, who is joining us online this evening, and Helen Rai, who will be all introducing themselves. At this time, I will be turning it over to Marc.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How's everybody doing? Good. Everybody's good spirits, full, snacks in the back. I am really loud, and I've always been loud, so I'm gonna be mindful of my voice in the microphone as well. But it is truly an honor to be here. I want to thank obviously the dean, Danita, Anna, James, Ashley, everyone that helped put this together. Our host Amy, thank you as well. I'm excited, very excited to be here. And I want to start before we go down and introduce everyone. When we had our pre-meeting, there was a conversation that we had, and one of the things that came out of it was kind of a question for the audience first, and a little bit of a challenge. So I'm gonna pose that question, have you think about it. We'll do our introductions, and then at the conclusion of the introductions, we'll ask for some immediate feedback to the question of, here it is, what are you hoping to get out of this conversation? What would you like to gain from the panelists, or at the conclusion of this conversation? If you can think about that while we go around and introduce ourselves, we'll come back as soon as at the conclusion of introductions, we'll kind of get some feedback so we make sure that we hit our marks in regards to what you're hoping to hear from this conversation this evening. Is that all right? Is that okay? We do, as was stated earlier, we have an amazing group of panelists that I'm excited to learn from as well as you. We'll go and do some quick introductions and tell us a little bit about backgrounds and the alignment on the topic this evening. I'm going to start since Jackie's stuck in traffic, but she has pulled over and is safe and has made time for us. I want to start with Jackie. We'll go to Abby and Helen as well. But the question one is, tell us a little bit about your background and its alignment to the topic. So if we can start with Jackie, actually, that'd be great.
Yes, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Just let me know if you can't hear me at all. Do I sound okay still? Okay. Awesome. So yes, I am a macro social worker, and it's funny because at first I was going to be a family therapist. Well, honestly, before that, I was planning to be an attorney. And so, once you start social work, you just fall in love with it. And I'm sure, everyone here can kind of attest to that. So really stuck with that social work, but I still always really had that advocacy, that systems mind. And so, as I began taking classes, I began to land a couple internships in community. So some of you may be familiar with maybe like Peter Paul Education Center, Storefront for Community Design, the 6 Points Innovation Center. So a lot of my background began at that community level, working with families, working with neighbors, and building that relationship. And then I kind of found my way working in local government with the health department. So here in Virginia, and I'll probably explain this more throughout our panel. So the health department is technically ran by the states, but we're deployed at the local level. So with that being said, I would say that's one of the clearest examples of how my macro work really aligns with the topic we're going to talk about today. And so really blending, working with community members and connecting them to a lot of the systems, big P and little p policy changes that need to happen.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you so much. And you're right. We'll follow up on that as we go through this conversation. I'm going to pass it over to Abby.
Thanks, Marc. Shout out to Jackie for doing a panel in your car, stuck in traffic. Big points for that. I'm Abbey Philips. I use she and her pronouns. I work at the Legal Aid Justice Center as their policy director. And a little bit about me. I like to say I kind of stumbled into social work. I was always trying to smash together some sort of justice work, community service, and for a little while music. I'm a double alumni from B.S.W, and I did music in undergrad, and then came back a couple years later and did the M.S.W program. And when I went into the program, I knew I wanted to do macro. I was very interested in policy before I even got to the macro program. I was very interested in human trafficking policy. I actually did my research in the master's program on human trafficking policy. But I also knew nothing about policy, big P policy. So my family was very politically active when I was a kid, but I didn't know much about what happens locally, what happens on the state level, what happens on the federal level, and frankly, probably was paying more attention to the federal level than what was happening more hyper locally around me. So I did the master's program, and I applied to intern in then Delegate Jennifer McClellan's office, who always, fun fact, had social workers running her office, macro social workers.
And I actually thought she was a social worker when I applied to that internship because so many people had talked about her like she was. She's not a social worker. She's a lawyer. She's like a telecommunications lawyer. But I got to see the General Assembly, the Virginia General Assembly space up close and see what it looks like to make an impact in that space and what it could look like to have those who are trained social workers trying to impact that space. And I just kind of got the policy bug from that. So I graduated and Jen brought me on as staff. I worked with her for 5 years in the House of Delegates. Then we went over to the Senate, the Virginia Senate. I worked with her for 5 years in the Senate. I helped run her gubernatorial campaign when she decided to run for governor. And got all the way burnt out on that. That was very difficult. Pandemic, gubernatorial campaign, and it was just hard. It was hard. We were fighting to get the first Black woman governor in Virginia into office, and it was just a hard thing to navigate. A lot of moral injury, if you will. So after that, I took a break. I thought I was really going to take a sabbatical, and a friend of mine in the governor's office gave me a call and said, "Hey, I heard you were taking a break. How about you don't take a break and you come work with us for a little while?" And I was like, "I'm taking a break." And she was like, "Well, what if you like sort of take a break and also work with us?" And I was like, "I don't know what that means." And she said, "Well, take a couple weeks off, think about it." And she kind of teased all these things to me that we could work on. And one of the things, this was the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office in the governor's office, and it was Governor Ralph Northam. It was the very end of his administration. And they were looking to do as much as they could in the last 6 months of his administration, and they wanted me to help with their pardons, because the governor has executive power to pardon people who are incarcerated or who are not incarcerated. And I had been working for a long time in Delegate and Senator, now Congresswoman McClellan's office on communication with people who are incarcerated. Very vulnerable population. Not many people are advocating for accountability in that space. And I had built relationships with folks that were incarcerated who were trying to get pardons, and decided to go and try to help get them a pardon in the governor's office. So I did that for 6 months. I also had a really cool opportunity to work with the tribal nations in Virginia. If you don't know, Virginia has 7 tribal nations. They do act as sovereign nations in Virginia, and there are another 4 Virginia tribes that share territory, state territory with Virginia. And that was a really amazing experience to get to know the tribes and all the amazing things they are doing in Virginia, including a lot of healing work. And I was really honored to be able to do that with them for a little while. Then I went and worked for nonprofits. I actually got a nonprofit management certificate from B.S.W. and didn't use it at all for like 10 years. And then eventually found myself in the nonprofit world and worked for a nonprofit that worked with families who had loved ones incarcerated. And then I ended up at the Legal Aid Justice Center a couple of years ago and do their policy work. That was a little longer winded than I was expecting to be. Getting a little bit passionate there talking about the pardon process, but thank you for giving me some space. Can I pass it down?
We're going to pass it down to Helen.
My name is Helen Rai, and I am also a macro social worker. How I got into social work is I was born in Nepal, and then when I was still a kid, I immigrated to the US. So, and then I, navigated a whole bunch of things. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went to B.S.W. But I saw my mom growing up in Nepal, also growing up as a religious minority, like experiencing a lot of different things, and then her advocating for herself, especially as a disabled person. all of that was kind of like in the back of my mind. So then when it was time to decide to go to college, I was like, I guess I want to help people. And I feel like that's like top answer every time someone wants to become a social worker. It's like, they want to help people. Who knows what that means? So I decided to pursue social work at BCU. And then when I started doing my classes, it was like my mind was blown because I got so much historical context for how I grew up, how what we experienced here, like why that was the way it was. So it was really like life changing, and I wanted to continue to learn more. So I decided to pursue my M.S.W and get into macro work because my brain just works a little bit more at that level with like just systems thinking. And from there, I've kind of been able to combine my lived experiences, and then just, I guess, trying to make lives easier for people who might be in like similar life paths as I went through. So right now I'm the director of client engagement at ReEstablish Richmond, and we work with the newcomer population. And then I'm also the program director at Circles RBA, and we work with low-income folks who want to pursue economic stability. And those are like both the lived experiences that I've had. So I'm not a policy expert, but I'm kind of like the other part of macro where I just make sure that organizations run well so that we can do what we say we're gonna do. So that's kind of where my expertise lies.
Helen, I'm so glad you said that, because when I kind of thought about professional careers and degrees as well, that was my default, was I just want to help people. And I wanted to figure out what major or career or what could I do. And it kind of feels weird to say that. As somebody asks you, like, why do you do the things you want to do? And you're like, I just want to help people. And my grandmother, who passed away last November, was the first person to say, like, nope, that's it. Like, that's the end of the sentence. You don't have to like continue to explain why you want to help people. You just say you want to help people and then say period. And so I always remember that. And I'm so glad you said that, because I resonate with that myself. All right, I told you what the question was on the pop quiz, and now it's your turn to answer, ladies and gentlemen. Just throw some things out there in regards to, obviously, now you've gotten a little familiar with the panelists. What would you like to hear from them as we continue this conversation, or what questions would you like to get by the end of it? We have a number of questions, some that were submitted, and we will get to as many as possible, but we want to make sure we're hitting the mark. So anyone got anything as we begin?
So I'm a non-social worker in the room. I work for the Waller School alongside James Romnick. Could you explain to me at the very basic level what you all are saying when you say micro, macro? So I'm familiar with these terms.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll default to Abbey too. That's a great one for an explanation. When we think of micro, we think of direct service. We think of implementing direct service to families and systems and so forth. When we think of macro, we think of policy and what policies we can put in place to affect those systems. A lot of, I don't know if I don't think I'm unique in this at all. I wanted to start with micro. I wanted to work in youth homes at the time. And while I was going through my internships and my career and so forth, I realized that if some of these policies, like, what's the barriers that was troubling me in my job? Like, what was, like, we're on the ground, but the job is really hard. And it's like, how do you make it easier? And they were like, well, that's a policy issue. That's not a direct service. You have to implement the policies, but if you want to make your job easier, you have to change the policies. And then that and a couple of episodes of West Wing later, I was like, I'm volunteering in a political office. But am I hitting the mark, Jackie, Abby, Helen? Yeah.
Oh,
I
there's
would.
3
Oh, I'm
P's
sorry.
in the swap program.
Yeah.
Right.
And then someone might need to help me out. It's like policy, practice.
Program planning.
Program planning. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's beyond policy too. It's just like I mentioned, just working in nonprofits or human service organizations, making sure systems within those organizations work well. And so it's kind of thinking about the background and the operations and the logistics. Sometimes I say it's like business for social work. And that's what I would describe as like part of macro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna just add that program planning part. So I always look at it as like the middle between the policy and on the ground. And another M word that you'll hear is mezzo. So when I spoke about working and doing like some community organizing or working with neighbors to like build relationships with other neighbors, that kind of work. So some people may consider that mezzo work, right? Because it's not direct service as in like social services. I wasn't helping them keep their lights on at the time, right? However, I also wasn't at that time working on like policy changes within local government, but I was at the neighborhood level. So you may hear some examples of that, or you will hear some examples of that throughout. I'm sure all 3 of us at some point have done some of that work.
Excellent point. Both excellent points. And thank you for the question, Steve. Is there any other questions from the audience in regards to result-based, what you would want to hear from this particular panel?
So a couple of us here tonight are graduating in May. We're in the macro program. And we talk a lot, like I think there's sort of this disconnect between what you're learning in school and you're like talking about all of these radical ideas, and then in some of our internships or just like the reality of professional spaces, there's not always the connection. It feels misaligned and that can be frustrating. And so I guess when we're talking about futuring and applying these things to make a better tomorrow, like hearing about examples of where you think that the more radical stuff we're talking about in schools is actually happening in the organizations that you work in, or places where it's not, and how you would like to see it move in that direction.
That's a great question. So examples in practice, we'll try to hit that as well. I think I saw a hand over here. Or no? What was it?
Oh,
did I not?
yes, I did.
Okay.
I'm an LCSW and work in homeless services. So I guess I'm also just thinking about like the currently what's happening. And so like maybe just things that are coming up for you all in this space. Like I know it's really tough, and our organization is really suffering as well, and a lot of the folks that we work with directly every day. And I would say I also end up doing a lot of like mezzo macro-y type work too. I'm the director of our case management and outreach program services. But yeah, I'd love to just hear any like hope, advice. I don't know what.
Hope is strong.
And like just how we as social workers like fit into that, and what that looks like, and how we can be, I think, like the best advocates we can be, especially during this time.
And there are 2 questions that's a great segue, and it's a couple questions that hit directly on that. And I'll start and ask one, and I'll go to Abby and Helen.
Did you have your hand
I'm
up
sorry.
as
Was there
well?
somebody else? Did I miss one?
No, it was that pretty much. I resonated with what you said when you were talking about your time being interested in micro, and then you're like, oh, these systems making my job harder. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of like as a micro practitioner, how we can do something with that feeling.
Yeah, I'd like to build on that a little bit. I'm a macro social worker. I've been doing housing policy for about 20 years, kind of intersection of housing and healthcare. And, there's like an assault on, I've been trained to be a system thinker and to link systems, whether that's justice involved, healthcare, homelessness, eviction prevention, and there's like an assault right now, and we are feeling it on work from a consultant on the equity side of things, where they're purposely siloing everything and destroying it. And I think my question is, how do we, and I'm only experiencing it from my perspective, and that's happening in all these other areas. So how do you, how do you kind of move forward and bring everybody on the same direction when,
Forgive me in advance. I tend to joke a lot. And I was going to say, Matt, if you figure that one out, we'll make you Senate Minority Leader. Because that's the $1 million question, right? Like, how do you figure these things as well? But that's a great question, and we'll try to answer. One of the first segues was that, they got one more. All right, no worries.
I am a part-time student at the School of Social Work, M.S.W. And so I'm still thinking of, I have a bit of a luxury because I get to marinate in some of this. And I am also wondering, like, as you have been out for a little while, what do you wish you had done, asked? How do you wish you had participated in your time and learning in school? Whether that's within the facility itself of education or within your internships or people that you met or resources. Like, what do you wish you kind of had taken advantage of or brought with you?
I'm going to try to remember it. On question 11, I'm going to try to add that in there as well, because that's a great, thank you so much for that. One of the things that we're going to ask each of the panelists, and I do think it'll hit on some of the kind of direct services, direct practice stuff area, if you will, is the question of what is everyone seeing in their practice direct service? And can you give an example or a story? What are things that could be helpful that you're seeing, or what are some things that are hurtful that you're seeing as you go through your practice? So, Jackie, did you hear that? I was going to start with you.
Yeah, I did hear you. So I guess I'll start with can I start with one of the things that's like hurtful and then hit on the high note?
Any way you want to go, Jackie.
Yeah, so I think one thing that is definitely at top of mind, and I feel like I'm like constantly checking, is everything going on with the potential, and I've heard some places have already started to feel the Medicaid cuts. And so I know I brought this up when we all met. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is I would venture to say that most of us in the field, I don't know the percentage, but over half of our community members that we're working with likely have Medicaid, right, or some form of it. And so to Helen's example of you're all in the macro space, you're always thinking about the program side of it. So a lot of times I'm thinking, how can we rebuild this program without trying to build Medicaid? So I'll give like a solid example of how we've already started the ball to that happening. But yeah, okay. So the solid example would be there's a group in Richmond called the Trauma Healing Response Network. And side note, I forgot to share this. I don't work in Richmond now, but I do some consulting work with my agency, The Lightwork. So the Trauma Healing Response Network is a grassroots, community-based network. People that have lived experience, that have experienced firearm injury or death themselves are leading the response and the prevention of firearm injury and death, right? And so there's a portion of that where we have mental health providers. Some of them are clinicians. Some of them are identified as healers in like various healing modalities. And so for the clinicians, we know that many clients are filling out a request form to say, hey, I want a one-on-one session and I have Medicaid. So before this previous year, when the network first started, we ran into a barrier where folks had either had Medicaid or they maybe fell off their insurance ended. And I can explain that a little bit more later. So as we began to build it out, we asked Richmond City Council for funding to fund this program. And so within it, we were able to say, hey, we're getting a lot of people that want clinical services. They either A, have Medicaid, or B, they don't have access to it for various reasons. And so one specific case, there was a, I think she was maybe like 22-year-old. She just lost her spouse. And she's like, I want this help, but I don't have my Medicaid card. I don't know where it is. I don't even know if I'm enrolled. So if you all can imagine, this shooting incident just happened. We can't really build programs where we're like, hey, sign up. Let's wait the 30 days for you to get your Medicaid. Also, this stress of like, where's my card? I don't know my card number. And then we'll connect you with a therapist. That doesn't work. It doesn't work, right? And so what we ended up doing was having various volunteers. Some were from the Richmond Association of Black Social Workers. And they said, hey, like, I'll do it for pro bono, right? I'll do a session and help them ground themselves and just a quick on-site. We were able to prove that that was effective. So we went before City Council and they ended up giving us additional funding to say, hey, you can use some of this to fill in the gaps for situations like that. And it opened the door for community members who wanted, some various type of healing that may not be formal therapy. Again, for all the LCSWs on the call in the room, there's certain things that you can and cannot bill to Medicaid, right? And so when we think about different cultures, there's all these different ways that people choose to heal that may not be supported by that. And then there's the other side of folks that do want the traditional therapy. So kind of wrapping up the comment in a nutshell, as I think about all the changes to Medicaid, I'm like, we did it once with that. How do we continue to find other funding that's more unrestricted? It's free. We can do with it. We can do what we would like to do without all of the red tape of like, you can charge for this, you can charge for that. So that would be like one answer to. Sorry, I went a little bit around, so I hope that was helpful.
Jackie, it was very helpful, and I want to comment on what I'm hearing from you because it was something I thought in there that was really important. Yeah, you identified the problem, and you identified the restrictions to the problem, the systematic restrictions. You creatively built a process in which you were able to provide direct service pro bono, and then ultimately, am I hearing this right? You did get it funded.
We were able to get some funding. So this year, the Richmond Association of Black Social Workers actually have a full contract with the city to be able to provide that therapy. So families are able to get 2 to 3 sessions, regardless of whatever type of insurance they have or don't have. And we do ask what kind of insurance they have so that after those 3 sessions, we can then route them to someone they've already built rapport with, because we also noticed that there was like this breakdown. But yes, so we were able to creatively get that and get funded.
That in itself, I believe, is a good news story, right? And I wanted to highlight that, Jackie, and rephrase it simply because I think that answers some of the questions that we were starting to get out of the audience when you're bumping your head against these systems and things are getting slashed, right? The programs are getting slashed from whether it's the Trump administration or the federal government and so forth. Jackie and a group figured out not only like a alternative, if you will, but ultimately led to a path of that getting funded in a way that can help. So those are just ways of thinking outside the box as you continue on. And thank you for that, because that was a really good example and a great story. I'm going to pass it over to Abby as well. And just, as you said, restate the question about what are some of the things you're seeing in practice, if you could give an example, and what are some of the things that are helpful and hurtful policy-wise.
Lots of stories are coming to mind, so I'm going to try to just pick one. So I primarily, policy-wise, practice in the Virginia General Assembly. At Legal Aid Justice Center, I help with all of our 6 programs, which are across criminal legal reform for adults and kids, immigration, health and public benefits, workers, and I didn't say 6, I'm missing something. Housing and consumer. So we're across a lot of different issues, which means we're in a lot of different conversations in the policy space. We're part of a lot of coalitions, and are partners with a lot of advocacy organizations, a lot of 501c3s that are doing work in the General Assembly space. So we're just wrapping up our General Assembly session. Virginia goes into session every year in January, and they're in session 45 or 60 days. And the Governor Youngkin, just made his recommendations to all the bills. There's a little over 800 bills that passed out of the General Assembly. So he made his recommendations. He vetoed some things, which basically effectively means he killed the bills. Makes some recommendations, sends them back to the General Assembly, and they'll consider those things next week. So we're coming off of like a hyper intense period of time. When you're in session, you're just working too many hours a day. It's like 15, 16, 17, 18, lots of hours a day, depending on what's happening. It's a very intense period of time where they're pushing thousands of bills through the General Assembly in a very short period of time. So it's very intense, and emotions can get very high, and it can get really political in that space. So the bills that were introduced this year that we worked on were across all of our issues. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, I think I'm going to do two. One, we helped run a coalition called the Fund Our Schools Coalition. And the Fund Our Schools Coalition has existed for many years and has been trying to get the state to fairly and equitably fund the public school system for a long time. And what does that look like? One of the things it looks like is making sure that schools have support staff in schools. There's been a cap in Virginia on support staff since like 2008, a long time. And that means that schools don't have money to have support staff. What are support staff? Nurses are support staff. Janitors are support staff. Assistant principals are support staff. So a lot of times you end up in situations where the school just doesn't have enough adults there to help the kids navigate everything that they need. It puts a lot more on teachers' plates. It's really, really difficult. And it's millions of dollars to lift the support cap, but we've been trying for years to lift the support cap. There's also specialized support positions, which would include like social workers and school counselors. And we've been working on those ratios for a long time too, to make sure that more social workers and more school counselors can be in schools. But there's other things too, like ELL students, right? We don't have enough support for ELL students. Our ELL student population is suffering in schools because we do not have enough support for them to get through school and academically succeed, and also like emotionally and behaviorally succeed because they have the support that they need. So the Fund Our Schools Coalition is a bunch of different organizations that have been advocating with the state legislature and the governor for a number of years. I mean, when I say number of years, I mean like a decade, to fully fund schools. And it's so hard to get schools fully funded. It is so very hard. We're talking hard to even get money for like buildings falling apart. Like our kiddos, I have a second grader in Richmond Public Schools, like our buildings are so old, there's mold in them. It is so difficult to get money to pay teachers well. Virginia is below the national average and has been below the national average for a long time. This position, teachers, that's one of the most important positions out there, and we have struggled to get money to pay teachers so we can attract them and keep them in those roles. So this year we had some really great wins, like lifting the support cap. Finally, the legislature has decided to fully lift the support cap and funded it. They also added, I think it was $59 million additional dollars for special education. Virginia ranks very poorly in special education in our public school system. So they added more money for that. They added some other funding for English language learners. It was really positive. The governor amended the budget to take the money for the support cap and changed it so that that money would go towards school vouchers. So he's moved that money to something else. Next week, we'll figure out what happens with the budget. But that's hard. It's like you get a victory and then you have one step back. You have one step forward and one step back. And that is part of the struggle in, I think, the policy space. Is it's such a marathon. It is a marathon and it is hard. It's hard not to lose hope. It's hard not to lose focus. It's hard not to feel that kind of moral injury when you're fighting for some of the most vulnerable populations, and it can take years and years and years to move the needle forward. And then sometimes you have backlash, right? Like what we're dealing with on a national level right now and how that's trickling down to our states, to our nonprofits. You have backlash when you make progress. And it's really, really difficult. And then the other thing I'll say quickly and then pass it on, we have seen terrible anti-immigrant bills in Virginia this year, terrible. And the Legal Aid Justice Center, along with many other organizations, worked very hard to kill those bills and make sure that they did not pass. But our immigrant community is suffering right now. I know a lot of people are suffering, but there is real danger and fear in separating families and hurting individuals. And there were bills that did not pass, and then there were executive orders that were introduced to like demand ICE cooperation across the state. And so there is so much fight happening right now on all levels, but some bad things that I saw, or harmful things that I saw, are some really bad anti-immigrant bills. Thankfully, they did not go through, but we're talking bills that would have impacted children, bills that would have impacted people's ability to get health coverage, bills that would impact mothers, children. I mean, it just like across the board. And it's a really tough space right now because there is a narrative fight around immigrants being violent, and that narrative is resulting in a lot of nasty political atmosphere and really bad bills that are coming through. And it's just a horrible thing to be facing. And I know we're working as collective organizations on these issues, not just on killing bad policy, but introducing good policy and really fighting the nasty narratives that are happening right now.
We'll just go right to Helen.
For us, like talking about, these bills that are really targeting newcomers in the US, I think there's just a lot of fear in the newcomer community. And maybe if you've been here a while, you might not feel this way, but the US has been like a rescuer and an escape for a lot of people who have come from countries with dictatorship and fascism, and that's been, like an escape for them. And then now to be here and then be targeted and like the same kinds of things that they saw in their countries, even what I saw in my country growing up, like happening here, and then kind of just corruption happening at like the high levels I feel like I don't even know how to process that right now, because it just really feels like it's affecting my reality and my sense of safety. And I've been here a long time. I'm now a citizen, but even with like upcoming travel plans back to my country, my husband has a green card, and I've been hearing stories of people being detained, and I'm like, should we even go? And are we going to be let back in? So there's just a lot of fear all over the place, especially if they put another ban on countries. And I know that they're trying to put in some additional countries on that list so it doesn't get called a Muslim ban again. But, people are really, I think, bracing for that impact. And so we've been kind of telling clients is like, get your families here as soon as you can. especially if you're from a country that is gonna be on that list eventually when it comes out, don't make any travel plans. And that's really hard to tell people to do because it's very expensive to go back and come back to the US. And people have been saving for years. They haven't seen their families for 5, 10, 15 years. And then now things like this is happening and it's really like putting restrictions on like living freely. And so I think, you know, it's just all of these things have been really affecting us, like work-wise and just personally. And I don't really know how to make sense of it. I don't know if we just like need to wait out this administration, because it just feels like they're not following anything, right? Like it's just people, it just seems like they're just doing whatever they want and literally just abducting people off the streets, which I feel like maybe it was happening and it wasn't mainstream. And I know it was happening, especially targeting like undocumented folks. That's been happening for, you know, forever. But for now to be targeting people who just are like a threat to the administration because of what they said or what they believe in, it's a little mind-boggling to be in the US and see that.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. I keep sharing all that. I do think like these tactics are really designed to tear us apart too. They're designed to tear us apart and scare us so that we do not come together in community and keep fighting for justice and fighting for protection. And so all of this chaos, I think, is very intentional, and I think it's designed to scare us and it's designed to stifle us and keep us silent. And I just wanted to name that. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Nope, I'm gonna go
on.
I'm gonna go right. I'm gonna go right to a question that I think fits in this. One of the things that Abby, you mentioned that I think is part of the reality that I know our time in the governor's office, or part of our time in the governor's office, we lived quite a bit was, and you start to see it now, and obviously at the federal level, when you're in the minority, and that means you don't have obviously the majority of the House and the Senate, or the ones that make up these things. Like I would say 85%, 90% of your fight is preventing bad things from happening. So when you talk about the immigration bills that you've seen at the state level this time, the other thing is it's you don't get any credit for blocking bad things that hasn't happened yet. So it often does seem like nothing's happening, and you don't go out and kind of advocate to say, look at this really bad thing we stopped, because people want to see proactive action, right? So it's a really challenging position to be in. You mentioned it, but you see it often where it's like, and as Helen said, this administration as well, there's just so many things coming at you at so many times. It's really hard to figure out where to coalesce and put your energy. I want to go to question 6 because I think it's germane to this, and it is when you're seeing these things, effective advocacy. Effective advocacy, how do we effectively advocate for change, especially from a social worker point of view? In this climate that we're in, most people are scared, and oftentimes it doesn't seem as if obviously this administration responds to much. But even at the local level, the state level, and we can talk a little bit about the federal level, how do you effectively advocate for the things that you want to see? And I feel like I'm always starting with Jackie, but do you want to start, or does then somebody else want to start?
Yeah, that's okay. I can jump in. That is like a huge question. But the couple of things that come to my mind, and ironically, I want to shout out Amari Kadavi. I know he works for Legal Aid. Him and I just did a training together called Passion to Policy. And so some things that he shared that any average person can do are FOIA, FOIA. A lot of people don't realize that the average person, any one of us, you can email any government agency and say, hey, because of the Freedom of Information Act, like I want to see X report or blah, blah, blah. You can use that. And what that does is it helps hold those agencies accountable for some of the decisions that they're making. And some agencies like may still make the decision and not care, but there are definitely things that have been happening to communities. And so one of the stories that he shared that Legal Aid really supported with, you all may have heard about like the various over the years of lawsuits that Richmond Redevelopment Housing Authority has had, right? And so they've been in the newspaper, the national news, and then at one point they were in 2018. Our RHA was the highest landlord evicting folks. In our region, and Richmond was the highest city in the entire United States for evictions. And so this past year, they actually had to pause all of their evictions because and I won't take the much of the time explaining every piece, but because he and the team at Legal Aid were able to identify that they were not following policy, right? And so they were able to call that out. Their attorneys were able to do all of their attorney work and really hold them accountable. So they actually froze that. Sorry, I feel like I kind of went off a little bit. The other way to that I think you can effectively advocate is always that like organizing and education, right? So a lot of things happen because folks that are making harmful decisions are counting on the fact that people don't know what's going on, right? So the more that we can educate ourselves, like I just shared, like FOIA, people don't realize they can do that. As simple as like, when is the next election? When are city council meetings? They're recorded. You can look up the agenda before and after. Just general knowledge, I really feel that that piece will go a long way. The last thing I'll share that I feel I have used, it can get kind of tricky. I definitely have had some moral injuries sometimes, but the skills we learn in social work, the interpersonal skills, turn those on. That is how I feel like I've definitely been able to effectively advocate, and just sharing folks' story. And everyone like wakes up and feels that they're doing the right thing, right? Even when people pass policies that we may not necessarily agree with, folks still feel like they're doing the right thing, right? And so I think sometimes when you can kind of like see a person and just, I'm not even talking about like finding the common ground, like that's a whole nother thing, but maybe just kind of hearing where they're coming from. And I have been able to say like, okay, although I don't agree with it like at all, like whatever the topic is, right? I can see where you're coming from with that. And so that has helped people let their guard down a little bit, and they'll at least have a conversation with me, right? And so when I have that conversation, then I'm actually able to use a lot of that information to say like, okay, well now let me hold you accountable for blah, 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 right? And so people really appreciate being heard. Speaking of the backlash that Abby mentioned, like some of it is like folks don't feel like they're being heard, which is, we can sit here for hours and talk about that, but nonetheless, people still feel that way. So those are some of the most effective strategy examples that I would share.
And those are fantastic, Jackie. Thank you for that, and especially when you're talking about kind of leaning back to that, some of the things that you learned in kind of social work, the interpersonal relations. I think that's a big part of it, and you hit it right on the head. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to go down and effective advocacy at every level.
I didn't write too much for this question, and I don't have too much just because that is not something that like I personally have wanted to do. I tried to get into policy work and was like always, I was the policy fellow, and you guys had the federal policy fellow program and went to lobby day and all of that. But I think it does take a lot of work, that interpersonal work, and I am just not willing to do that.
Yeah, it's a lot of the
That's
time.
how we're strengths flag. I will say what might be effective. I mean, what's going to be effective is going to depend on you and what you're willing to put in it, right? And so for me, I'm just thinking about like, what groups can I join? where I can just support them either with my time and money, versus me having to do all of the brain work, right? Because this is a lot, like all of what Abby's doing, I could not do, right? So I think you just have to know yourself and then see how best you're gonna be effective in like making sure advocacy.
It's no respect. I really did.
Sure, Abby, you have some things on this one.
I have a couple thoughts.
All right.
I think so. One thing that I always say is, I'm doing macro social work, right? I'm doing policy work, but I am doing that from community-based and informed guidance. So we don't introduce legislation or act on legislation because we have a bunch of smart lawyers that work. I mean, we do also, but our model is to do that work in community and to let the community voices that are most impacted by those issues guide and lead how we focus on things. And so when I hear my clinical friends say, what can I do as a clinical social worker? I have been saying for years, it is actually, I think, way more important for clinical folks to be involved in policy than it is for, because I'm in this space, but like, I'm not an expert on literally anything, right? Like my expertise is I can navigate politics. That's, I mean, I guess that's something, right? So, but if you say, but I can't do that work. Like I can't work on eviction legislation without hearing from community members who have been evicted, or hearing from like clinicians who are in public schools with kids that are seeing the effects of not having public school funding. Like everything I do is actually informed by direct service. And so the work that you're doing as a clinician is so important in the larger systemic space, because that is what should drive the change, right? That, like, if we're, you know, that classic, like, oh, I can come into a community and I'm going to identify your problem. No, you need to allow the community to identify the problem and tell you, this is the challenge that we're facing, and this is how we think we should solve it. And so I think it's extremely important for clinical folks to be able to see themselves in this space. And it might not be like you're the one testifying on a bill or you're the one asking for the bill, but you could be the person sharing what you're seeing on the front lines. You could be the person who's saying, well, this is how this is working in the clinical space, and it's just not working. And if we had more funding for this, or if we had a different structure for this, or we're just seeing a trend with our clients, and that trend could be addressed systemically because we're seeing it happen to a bunch of people, and the law needs to be changed, or the resources need to change in order to allow people space to heal and get the resources they need and have their needs be met. So like, how do you do that, I guess, is another question, because you might have a whole job, right, working in direct service. And I do think Helen brought up a couple of things. You don't have to like reinvent the wheel on engaging in this kind of work. There's a lot of individuals and groups out there that are doing really great work and that you can plug into and learn how you can volunteer if you want to do that, but also just learning what those advocacy organizations are working on. If there's places you can plug in, like, oh, I work with kids, I might have some insight to offer on that. So I wouldn't say like put yourself in this position where you take a whole nother volunteer job, because these spaces are complicated to navigate. They're complicated on purpose. Like they do not want you to change the law easily, right? It is difficult to change the law, and it's not very accessible to be down there. And my recommendation is never like, just go walk around by yourself and figure it out, right? There is a reason that lobbyists get paid lots of money by private companies to represent them in that space. It's a lot about relationships. It's a lot about power. And if you don't know how the arena works, it's really hard to effectively advocate and navigate. It's really not built for the people. The system itself was not designed or built for people to easily access it and have their voices heard. So all that being said, that was encouraging, right? But all that being said, there's so many great groups that are trying to make the space more accessible and want you to get involved in their work they're doing. So like Voices for Virginia's Children is doing a ton of advocacy work for youth in that space. Rise for Youth is doing a ton of work around youth decarceration in that space and not over-criminalizing kids. The Virginia Poverty Law Center does a ton of work on housing. Home does a ton of work on housing. So there's a lot of groups already in the space doing that work. I think it's just finding who they are and seeing where you can plug in so that you don't have to like look at this big overwhelming system and try to figure out like, how do I tackle this? How do I figure out how to navigate it? You can learn more about how to do it and be in the space yourself. But I honestly think we're stronger together in partnership, and we're stronger together when we collaborate. And I think there's opportunities to do that on most any issue you're probably interested in.
Good points, all.
And Mark, I'm
Jack.
sorry, can I just add
Yeah,
one
go
more?
ahead, Jackie. Absolutely.
Back. So this is like a very nerdy answer, and it kind of blends the question that came up earlier about what do I wish I utilized more in school. So I forgot to mention. What'd you say?
That's gonna be my next question. I was really okay. No, go ahead.
Okay.
You're perfect. No, you're saying it's a good segue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot to mention data, because we know that numbers don't lie, but people can skew them to lie. But I will say, especially like your LCSWs, anyone doing direct service, there's a reason why doing your like daily encounter forms or your like monthly reports is so important. Because again, on the macro side, we are pulling that data to go meet with council person, congressperson, et cetera, to say, hey, look at this, look at the percentage of people that are being evicted, blah, 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 blah. Like pick any subject. When we don't have that data, it makes the job harder to get to change, right? And so people can say, oh, you just feel this way, you just feel that way. But if I can show you, and then I have a group of people that I've organized to pair the numbers with the stories, it really hits home. So like your statistics class that we all powered through. We powered through that class. When I think about like program evaluation, right? So taking it out of the policy space to your like program level, you have to prove to the funder that your program was successful. How are you going to do that, right? It doesn't always have to be like the SPSS type of program evaluation, but those same principles, like I have found myself saying, dang, like, do I need to like go back and like read? And do I need to get another certification, right? And I started to be more like into that kind of stuff. That's just like weird. But yeah, so I would definitely say that class, even if you just can remember some of the basic principles. And then obviously like just I always wish that I had more time to read more. Things like change so fast. So when you're like being told like, hey, read these 3 chapters, and it feels like, okay, I'm gonna read them. But I would just say like I find myself needing to like fall back. Like speaking of sabbatical, there are times where I'm like, dang, I wish I could just take off 3 months to just go back and like reread and just kind of sit in some things. So I would definitely that would be my answer to you.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I'll go quick on this. And we did get we got the 10-minute warning, so this will be the last question as we move forward. Before we'll have some more interaction. I will say there's a couple things I wanted to note, and I think everybody was hitting it on the head. The question that we got from the audience to ask was about effective advocacy, right? And I do want to be clear. Advocacy there's a difference between advocacy and policymaking. Okay, so policymaking is one separate thing than advocating for a policy, right? And so I'll speak a little bit quickly about what I know of advocacy, not the actual making of the policy, but I think in my experience, there's a couple of things that hit. Funding is a big one. So when you're advocating for something and you're funded, or you can remove funding, or you can affect funding, funding is very important when you're advocating with legislators. They often want to know what the bottom line is. A lot of the most vulnerable populations don't have a lot of funds, right? And that's a big challenge. The second thing I would say is people. And when I say people, it's how many people you can organize to let legislator X know we may not have the money, but we have the people that you're going to have to pay attention to us. The other thing is attention. I work directly every day as director of constituent services. I probably get a call probably once a day, definitely once every other day, from someone that's upset about something. And the first thing they're going to say is, hey, I know Senator Kaine doesn't want to deal with this, but if you don't help me, we're going to go to the, NBC 12, we're going to go to CNN, we're going to go to MSNBC. My response instantly is like, please go. Because if they can help you faster than we can help you with the level of attention they will provide, if an NBC 12 news story, news on your side gets the result that we all want it faster, please do it. And attention matters. There's a lot of things that attention can bring that maybe even your legislator can't. It's all mentioned on this panel as well, relationships. And one of the ways I always say to get those relationships is to show up. Not just show up when you're angry. We often in our office hear from advocates when they're upset. We tend to listen to the advocates that show up when we also need their support. So it's if you're in our office because you're upset, we understand we want you to be there. But when something is really rubber meeting the road and we need a lot of support, if you're there that way as well, and a lot of what we're talking about, the lobbyists and the people that do this professionally, they understand that. So they're like, hey, we had your back on X, now have our back on, and there's a lot of that happens. Jackie alluded to it and she hit it right on the head. Be organized. That includes a lot of data. That may include FOIA information, statistics of things of that nature. And then the last thing I'll say on this is be clear with the outcomes that you want. Be very clear when you're advocating, be clear with what you want the end result to be. Because as Abby mentioned, you might get the funding, but if Governor Youngkin or whoever moves the funding from X to something different, but very similar, he will come back to you and say, oh, we gave you what you wanted. And you're like, no, you didn't. And if you're not extremely clear about, where you want these funds to go. For example, we were advocating a while back on Ask Childhood Cancer Foundation about pediatric cancer. And they moved the funding to adult cancer with the idea that it was going to trickle down to pediatrics, and it doesn't. It's a very clear, distinct difference. And we had to say, no, you have to move the money back specifically for pediatrics because it doesn't funnel down. So you just have to be clear about the outcomes that you want. If there's any other questions on that, I'll be glad to follow up. But I always say funding, people, attention, relationships, those are the things in the advocacy space that really matter a lot. On the last question, and like I said, we've got just a couple minutes to finish up. So Jackie touched on it and it was asked by the audience. So just quickly, I would say, if you look back now, you guys have all been in your professional careers for a while. But if you go back to your education and your training, what is one thing that you wish you had either focused on more or learned that you think would have helped you as you've gone through your career? I'll start with you.
First.
Yep, this will be the last one, and we've got, like I said, about 5 minutes left.
I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome early on in my career, and I definitely think if I could go back, I would be like, girl, stop. Like that, don't waste any energy feeling like you don't belong in the spaces that you belong in. And so I think I would take more advantage of also like building relationships in a way that had my career in mind. Like I was in a position where I was helping a legislator. And so everything I did was about building her career, which was important. And I was honored to be in that role, but I didn't always think about myself in that role. And I think if I could go back, I would take advantage of more opportunities so that I could grow and learn and build more skill sets, and also just feel more empowered that I belonged in the space. I had a voice in the space, and that I was building an expertise around an issue and have more confidence around it. I mean, I think I still have imposter syndrome sometimes today, and I'm sharing that because I feel like maybe that's not unique, that we all sometimes struggle with that a little bit. And I think it's like culture that makes us feel that way. But I think that voice can get loud in our head, and it's okay that it pops up, but we need an answer for it when it shows up, right? Like we need to be like, hey, thanks for, whatever, trying to keep me safe, but I don't need your help right now. Like I got this. So I think if I could go back, I would try to think about like, where am I going with my career? I'm very focused on someone else's career. And I believe that person's career is really important to helping the community and making the world better. But also I have a role to play specifically, not just for improving that person's career, but also my own. And I think sometimes when you are in a helping profession, or like you're coming into this space because you want to help people, you don't stop and think, oh, well, how is this going to help me? And how is this going to help? It's like, heaven forbid, we think of ourselves sometimes, right? That's important, I think, in this space too, while you're thinking about what you want to do and what your future career looks like. Because yes, we are in this space because we believe in fighting for people, right? We believe in helping people. We believe in making the world better. But I think you can also consider yourself in that. One of my favorite authors is Octavia Butler. If you don't know her, check her out. She's amazing. But she wrote this parable series. And one of the things that she said, which I don't have tattooed on my body yet, but I will eventually, but one of the parables was, her character was Lauren Olamina. And Lauren Olamina was this like incredible leader in a very difficult time. It's actually very creepy how similar those books are in the time period we are in right now. But one of the parables she wrote was like, all that you touch, you change, but all that you change, it actually changes you too, right? And so I think sometimes we don't always think of ourselves as like, what is this doing for me? Not just what is this doing for the world?
I think like going through university, I feel like was a place that I grew a lot, and I really appreciated all of my professors who really invested and believed in me. I think that helped me so much in like being who I am today. I do think that I wish I had advocated for myself more during the field placements, because you're spending so many hours getting those field hours, but I feel like I did not have the responsibilities that I needed to, I think, that I had to like learn, I guess, as I grew my career. So I think, if you are a student, you are in a field placement, just make sure you advocate for yourself, that you are put in a position where you can like have your own responsibilities. That's beyond just, I don't know, like shadowing someone or even doing like client work, right? Like people do get that responsibility, but just having someone who gives you really good feedback and honest feedback, because I think a lot of the time, like the feedback that you get is like, oh, you're doing great, like, but it's not necessarily things that could help you learn or grow. And I think that's something I do wish I had would have had more of. as I'm like in these leadership positions that I feel like I just kind of like got thrown into, and I'm like, I need to figure out how to be a good leader. And, you know, I am going through those professional development things now. But I do wish I had more of that earlier. And I feel like unless you're in a corporation or a nonprofit that has a lot of money, like there's not a lot of investment in leaders, in providing leadership training. And so I do wish I had more of that when I was like younger.
And we are going to give Jackie the last word.
Yeah, so I touched on those two things earlier, like more reading and the data part of the work. But I definitely want to just double underline the part that Helen shared. The imposter syndrome too. Like we could do a whole workshop on that. But what you were sharing, Helen, I would say in my career, the pieces that I've struggled with the most actually have been managing other people, right? And so in a helping profession, a lot of us are very much like, okay, yeah, like, okay, what's best for the group? And we're also trained to like kind of facilitate and be very inclusive and like, what do y'all think? But what I've actually noticed is people really aren't used to that type of leadership. And so there's that one, getting people used to that type of leadership. And then sometimes you need to just say, okay, no, we're doing this. This is what we're doing. Right. And so I know for me, I have sometimes struggled with that. And I've noticed that it's caused some like issues, like disruptions with the team. And it's like, we just need a decision. It's like, okay, fine. I was trying to, you know, get us all kind of kumbaya, but that I have learned that that's a struggle. So if you guys do have professional development opportunities, even like coming to this panel, like continue to come to things like this, because for all the things that Helen shared.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Really quick, give a round of applause too. We have some time for just a couple of questions. I will ask the panelists to keep your answers as brief as, like not to cut you off, but we've got some time, and we'll try to answer as succinctly and fastly as possible. If we did, how did we do? Did we hit the marks at all about what you guys were looking for? Are there any last minute questions from the audience, or I don't know, Ashley, is there?
Nothing.
Okay, so feel free to ask your questions now, and then we'll try our best to answer them. Anyone while we're here? Yeah, go ahead.
Abby, you mentioned the community-led like component of policy work, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on the tools that you and your organization utilize to actually gather that information in a way, I guess just generally, that's sustainable and not like we're grabbing stories and then, you know, like, because it sounds like you're doing a really great job at that. And so I'm curious to hear about it.
You said be brief, right?
As best you can.
Thank you for that question. So part of the model at our organization is we are a legal aid organization. So that means we provide legal representation to low-income individuals and families. But we have funding. We have funding that is not just legal services funding, which is like where it's actually government funding for our legal aid, but we have unrestricted funding that has allowed us to hire community organizers. And those community organizers are across all 6 of our programs. A lot of them are multilingual. A lot of them come from different backgrounds. A lot of them are impacted community. And so they work to build trust with communities on a regular basis. That's a huge part of their job. And they're across all of our different offices. We have multiple offices and they're across multiple issues. And it is amazing to witness their work. I've had the pleasure of going into the community with them and watching them lead community meetings. But one of the things that they do is they help the community identify what their concern is, and then they help facilitate conversations with the community. And sometimes they're doing like simultaneous translation as they're as they're leading a community meeting with multiple languages being spoken. And they will help the community organize, because sometimes it's not a policy solution. Sometimes it's a protest at their landlord's office, right? So we have 18 community organizers at Legal Aid Justice Center. And some of them actually live in the areas where they're organizing, and that is part of what informs our policy work. And also we work in coalitions a lot. So we build coalitions with individuals. We have one coalition in Charlottesville called the People's Coalition, and they help inform the criminal legal work we do. We have another coalition in Richmond called RTAP, Richmond Transparency Project, and that helps inform some of the work we do around like policing and community policing work. And so our organizers are a huge tribute to that kind of work. And our lawyers work with our organizers. So the community organizers bring people to the organization that need help and assistance. And then a lot of times this is probably my cue to stop talking. But the lawyers will represent them legally if they need legal assistance. And then we actually sue people. We'll do lawsuits. That's another one of our tools in our tool chest, is that we'll actually sue people, including sometimes we'll sue the government if we need to, if they have discriminated against one of our clients. So we do lawsuits, we do communications work, like impact communication, so working with the media. We do individual case, and we do community organizing. We do policy work, but those community organizers are key to that model.
Any other questions? Yeah, I see one right here.
Yeah, just a comment. One of the things that social work as a profession has given up is community organization. And it's an essential part of what you all are attempting to do in your careers. You may want to give some thought to going to the literature and community organization, because it is social work.
Thank you so much. That's a great point. Great point. Yes, ma'am.
I actually just want to comment on that. We have a class currently that's community organizing in social work. That's part of the elective curriculum. I think actually all of us are in it. We are working to like move towards that.
And it's interesting too when you talk about community organizing, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of within social work if you have a social worker doing it. One of the things they talked about a little bit in the bio is that I spent probably the last 20 years building communities around various things. For 10 years, we built a kind of a community around arts, music, and culture here in Richmond. And the last 3 years or so, we built a community around kind of a diverse, inclusive baseball community. And it's kind of interesting because once you start to build those communities, then depending on what the values and the ethos of those communities are, you really can start to advocate for certain things that you want. And by building kind of the community first, it does make an impact in regards to some of the things that you want to see. It is effective. No one would say, advocating for diversity in baseball is a social worky thing, but we built a community and we were able to talk to, people in Major League Baseball headquarters about, why are the percentages of, African Americans as low as they are, and types of things like that. So there's, when you talk about community-based organizing, it can come in many different ways, shapes, and forms. And hopefully you have a social worker in the mix somewhere in there. I'm going to, at this time, one more time, round of applause for the panelists, and then turn it over to
Thank you to each of you. Let's follow that up one more time with giving thanks for a thoughtful conversation with each of our panelists. And Jackie, part of the panel as well. So we will have some nice swag for you all, because you all are forever Rams. Something to thank you and also to help you to remember your time here at BCU. In the spirit of resources, we have a couple of resources for each of you as well. So VCU Link. Who's familiar with LinkedIn by chance? Most of us are familiar with LinkedIn. So VCU has its very own version of a LinkedIn, and that is called VCU Link. So we invite you to be a part of that community where you can connect with fellow alum or students as well. Also, we invite you to save the date. So if you don't have your pens already or your calendars on your phones, please break that out now. We will be having coffee and conversation. That will be held on April the 16th at Perusia Coffee. That is in Scott's Addition from 8 until 10. So please stop in if you're on the way to work, if you're on the way to class. We are opening this up to our 2025 graduates. So please come out and join us. And Dean Gary Cuddyback, he will be there to join in the conversation as well. So please do join us. There is a QR code. So if you want to scan that and go ahead and reserve your spot, then stop by on your way to where you're going that morning. Also, we invite you to save the date for our alumni reception, which will be happening on May 22nd. So please mark your calendars, come out. We will be unveiling the location for that in the coming weeks. We also want to encourage you to save the date for our Giving Day. So between now and April 22nd, you are able to make a gift to support the school. And last but not least, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out to Social Work, Policy, and Politics. Please enjoy the remainder of the refreshments that we have. We have plenty, so please don't be shy about that. And please mix and mingle with one another. Thank you again to our esteemed panelists here and online. And thank you.
We have a comment
Okay.
from the chat, and it said, "Thank you. I graduated 50 years ago from VCU when we were fighting, advocating about Vietnam, and Gloria Steinem came to campus to discuss feminism. So happy to hear social workers continuing great work." Dr. Marc Rai.
Awesome. Thank you all, and thank you all to our virtual guests as well. Thank you.